The revolution's begun. The time to stand up has come. We are the rocking of the throne. We are the rocking of the throne.
I'm Victor Tiffany with Revolt Against Plutocracy. Many of you know, most people I know on social media and in the world, understand that Facebook recently purged hundreds of media groups, media pages from their social platform. Hundreds of individuals also had their accounts eliminated. You would think the supporters of free speech and the free press would denounce such a move. And I expected that to happen on reliable sources with Brian Stelter on CNN Sunday morning. Instead, this is what he said.
But first, some news you probably didn't hear about this week. Facebook did something great. The site purged hundreds of hyper-partisan pages. These accounts were spreading lots of lies and smears about political rivals on both the left and the right. And Facebook said, enough. Now, technically, it said it removed the pages because they'd engaged in spammy behavior. But the effect is to clean up some of the misinformation that pollutes the site. Twitter's been trying to do this too. Now, both sites have a long way to go, but good for them. They are trying to make progress.
So Brian Stelter doesn't like hyper-partisan Facebook pages, which really makes you wonder if he's even read Federalist Paper number 10. Madison struggled with the devastating effect that factions have in republics past and how they tend to tear each other apart. But he reasoned that the cure, eliminating, purging these groups, purging factions, suppressing factions, is a cure worse than the disease. Instead, he reasoned, the more factions, the better. Brian Stelter doesn't like hyper-partisan activity, right? It's, what, destructive? And this is not even extremist point of view as he's talking about. He wasn't talking about anarchists, communists, or libertarians, or you know, survivalists. He's just talking about blues, Democrats, and Reds. Something wrong with people going at each other to make a point, to argue for their candidate. I've never seen anything as un-American in mainstream media as I did with that little bit of Stelter declaring the suppression of these various media outlets on Facebook to be great. This is just astonishing. This coming from a channel, CNN, where they had this fake interview with Bana Alabeb, a 7-year-old refugee from Syria. Literally a fake interview. You can see the little girl's eyes reading back and forth when she's answering questions from the CNN host. Right? The absolutely fake interview. No, CNN, no, Brian Stelter, we haven't forgotten that. You're exposed as fake news and war-mongering propaganda outlet from that interview with her. And yet, you think it's bad that people on Facebook, groups, media groups, the anti-media group that got banished, that these are what? Competition for CNN? Is that the problem, Mr. Stelter? The problem I have with you thinking this is great is that it's so un-American. What's freedom of speech if you can't practice it? And I know there are people out there who are going to say, well, Facebook is a private corporation. You can't say whatever you want to say while you're working for a corporation. So why can't Facebook, a private corporation, curb your speech? And I'm going to quote Caitlin Johnstone on this, if I might, because she had a great response to that. Anytime you talk about how internet censorship threatens our ability to get the jackboot of oligarchy off our necks, you always get some guy in your group saying things like, quote, Facebook is a private company, it can do whatever it wants, end quote. Is it really? Has not Facebook been inviting U.S. government-funded groups to help regulate its operations, vowing on the Senate floor to do more to facilitate the interests of the U.S. government, deleting accounts at the direction of the United States and Israeli governments, and handing the guidance of its censorship behavior over to the Atlantic Council, which receives funding from the U.S. government, the EU, NATO, and Gulf states? How private is that? Facebook is deeply government-entrenched corporation, and Facebook censorship is just what government censorship looks like in a corporatist system of government. But neoliberal establishment Brian Stelter just thinks that's great. So let's be clear. CNN is not a reliable source of information. It's not to be trusted. And we've been advocating boycott of corporate media, mass media, CNN, Fox, MSNBC, boycott. Just avoid them completely if you can. The Real News is a good source, and we have on page 276 a list of media outlets that are trustworthy and reliable. So we encourage people to, of course, get this and share it. The whole point of this book is to foment revolution, to get media sites that can be trusted by revolutionaries so we know what the facts are, what the truth is. So one more point I'd like to make about this new censorship on Facebook. This is fascism. This is authoritarian fascism. If Donald Trump had ordered this, had ordered Facebook to purge all those groups, Brian Stelter would be up in arms. He'd be talking about President Trump's new fascism. Instead, it's Brian Stelter's new fascism. And let's call Facebook what it in fact is now. It has become a fascist book. It's not a place for free expression. You have to walk on eggs when you talk about anything on Facebook, and there's nothing wrong with being careful about being accurate. That's a good thing. But now, you have to be careful about expressing a viewpoint outside the establishment, outside what the Atlantic Council will allow us to say, without being purged suddenly. You wake up one morning and your account's gone. You've spent years building it up. Some of these groups had over 1 million followers gone in a flash because somebody didn't like it, because somebody doesn't like free expression. And one more point I want to make about misinformation coming from CNN. That's rich, but politicians engage in misinformation all the time. They attack their opponents with misinformation. Right? This is part of free speech. It's actually protected by the Constitution. Lying is, unless you're under oath or being questioned by law enforcement, lying is actually a right, a protected right. But they don't want people to lie. That's CNN's privilege role. That's up to MSNBC and Fox. It's okay for them to lie. But for citizens who don't have a mass-funded media channel to reach out to people on television, oh no, we can't allow that. Not on fascist book. So, boycott corporate mass media. And be very careful on fascist book. The alternatives, MeWe, of course, Media Revolt, Just Inform, JUSTNFORM, are social media networks that you can express yourself. You don't have to worry about the heavy hand of censorship. So I encourage you to join these other groups, and let's put an end to the monopoly of fascist book.
Revolt Against Plutocracy won't just be covering the news about the necessary revolution in the United States. Sometimes we'll be making the news. If you want to stay on top of the revolutionary actions and strategies of grassroots, genuine progressives, and our allies, please subscribe to our YouTube channel today.